Hello, everybody. This is Howie Hawkins. I was the Green and Socialist Party's candidate for president in 2020. And this is Green Socialist Notes, where we talk about educating and organizing around the eco-socialist program that Angela Walker and I ran on in 2020. And today I just got in from petitioning for a Green candidate for state senate here in Connecticut. I'm in Hartford, Connecticut. And his name is Michael Oretade. And there he is. He's right here with me. We're going to talk about his campaign and, some of the inequities. I just want to say, well, we're getting feedback. So maybe you should be in another room or I can put you on here. So, the democracy crisis. I mean, this week, a lot of things happened with Trump. He's got like 6 investigations going on, civil cases, criminal cases, investigation as to what happened on January 6th. FBI, went after those documents last week. And, it's not looking good for that guy. But, I still wonder if the Democrats are going to nail him here in New York. It's, we've known this in New York for a long time. The guy lied. Michael Cohen basically explained what he did. When he went for application for loan or insurance, he inflated his assets. And when he went to pay his taxes, he deflated his assets. So he was tax cheating and cheating the banks and insurance companies. And they got the paperwork. Now they got the chief financial officer who pleaded guilty, I guess it was yesterday, who now can plead the fifth about what happened inside the Trump organization, which is just a little mom and pop shop. Half a dozen people really know what's going on, maybe 10. It's not a big corporation. It's basically about his brand and TV show and some real estate. And, he owned some businesses like a casino and he lost money. He went bankrupt. I mean, how do you go bankrupt owning a casino unless you don't know what the hell you're doing or you're just pulling money out of it, which is what he was doing. So anyway, the district attorney in Manhattan got the 2 best prosecutors and trial lawyers for dealing with corporate crime and organized crime. And the new DA got elected and said, well, I don't think we have enough evidence. So those 2 prosecutors resigned in protest. You remember that. Now, here's where the Democrats could do something, but they won't. The governor of New York State, Kathy Hochul, could say, okay, we're going to take that from the DA and give it to the attorney general. But the attorney general in New York, as far as we know, hasn't asked the governor to do that. The governor hasn't done it. Now, that's Trump's criminal case with respect to bank insurance and tax fraud. There is a civil case that the attorney general was doing. And now that, I forget his name, the chief financial officer, the guy that kept the books for Trump, the Trump organization, pleaded guilty. She should have a good case. But, that might put the Trump organization out of business like it did his Trump University and other scams. But this guy is a criminal. When are they going to throw the criminal charge at him? And that's why, I'm concerned. Is he going to, is Merrick Garland going to follow up? Apparently, Giuliani is a target of that investigation. That was good news. So, that's what's happening on the establishment side. The Republicans are obvious crooks, and the Democrats got the power, but are they going to prosecute? Give you another case here in New York State. As you know, our party and 7 other aspiring gubernatorial candidates or tickets, it's governor and lieutenant governor, tried to petition onto the ballot in New York because they passed this draconian ballot exclusion law in 2020. And all the third parties that didn't cross-endorse Trump or Biden, which means the Working Family Party Biden and the Conservative Party Trump, lost their ballot line. So to get it back, we needed 45,000 signatures in 42 days. Triple the old standard to get on the ballot. And they raised the ballot qualification standards for votes and frequency you have to qualify. I mean, it's really designed to keep other parties off the ballot. And it succeeded. We do have a case in court. It's before the Second Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. If we win that, we'll be on the ballot. But we're not even having a hearing on that till after Labor Day. And whether the court will render a decision in a timely fashion or just make us wait and be harmed in this election remains to be seen. In any case, one of those petitions was from the Republican candidate who was trying to create a second ballot line in New York. And in New York, we have fusion, so you can vote for your candidate on one party line or another party line, and those votes add up to the total for that candidate. So he tried to recreate the independence line. He came up short. So what he did, his name's Lee Zeldin. He's a extremist from the right, from Long Island, who voted against certification of the 2020 presidential election, claiming like fraud, the big lie. I mean, claiming like Trump. I guess you could call him Mr. Fraud, but claiming like Trump that the Democrats committed massive fraud and been thrown out of 46 different courts in all the lawsuits Giuliani and those clowns brought. So he voted in Congress claiming the Democrats committed fraud. Then he turns around, and because he doesn't have enough signatures, he photocopies pages of signatures worth 11,000 signatures and sprinkles it through the petition, thinking nobody would catch him. Well, he got caught. And the news this week is that it was done, that petition assembly, in the headquarters of the Republican Party in Albany, New York, where the Capitol is. That's fraud. And it's more than the fraudster, the insufferable hypocrite Lee Zeldin. It's the whole damn Democratic, or at least the leadership of the damn Democratic Party in New York. So there have been complaints made to the district attorney in Albany County to prosecute these fraudsters. And seems like the DA is hemming and hawing. It's pretty obvious what the guy did. I mean, the evidence is right there. And if they don't bring him up on charges of fraud, that's the problem. The Republicans are becoming extremely authoritarian, racist, anti-democratic. And the Democrats, when they have a chance to call them on that stuff, prosecute them for violating laws, they don't do it. What's going on there? So anyway, here I am in Connecticut, and I'm getting signatures. And let's bring Michael Oretade on, because I'm talking about his petition. I've been out here, 90-degree weather again. It just wasn't as humid as it was in Philadelphia a few weeks ago. Well, I was in Harrisburg that day, Philly the next. And people said, oh, you got to rest, your face is all red. Well, it was hot, it was in the 90s, but much drier. So it wasn't so bad. And, we were out there getting signatures. Now, these are signatures, not to get on the ballot. Mike is on the ballot. These were signatures to qualify for the public campaign finance system they have in Connecticut. They have a good system, except for one thing I'll get to, in that they give equal grants to every candidate. It's not this matching funds scam where that's what the Congress, the Democrats wanted to do at the federal level. They've done it in New York State, New York City, and now implement it in New York State. But the problem with that is it increases inequality between candidates. So like in the federal legislation, to qualify, you needed $50,000 in small contributions. So suppose you barely qualify at $50,000, and you run against a candidate that gets, let's say, $100,000, which is, congressional candidates will probably get more than that anyway. So you multiply that by 6, and the $50,000 contribution then becomes $3,500, and the $100,000 contribution multiplied by 6, add 6,000 becomes 7,000. So instead of a difference of, 700,000. Anywhere, instead of a difference between 50,000 when they started, is now the difference between 350,000 and 100,000, 700,000. So $350,000 difference. 50,000 is $350,000. So a 6 times matching fund increases the disparity between the two candidates by 7 times. And that's what the Democrats are pushing around the country. What happened in Connecticut back, I think it was 2004, is they passed, third state to do it, a full public campaign financing system where once you do your minimum number of small contributions, which in Michael's case is 17,000 worth, he gets a grant. I think it's around 80,000. Now the disparity, and I'm talking about the inequality in the democracy problem, is that the Democrats and Republicans just got to raise the money. Michael has to raise the money and get over 5,000 signatures. And this disparity in the election law between how it treats, or the public campaign finance law, between how it treats the major parties and minor parties like the Greens litigated that. And I think it went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, fine, you can discriminate against minor parties. So, but we don't let that stop us. So that's why I was out there. Michael, why don't you just, introduce yourself again and add to what I was saying in terms of, this public campaign finance system and, how we're trying to overcome the barriers, extra barriers they put in front of the Green Party.
Yeah, being a third party candidate is very difficult in the state of Connecticut. That's why I'm a big advocate for ranked choice voting, because I feel like there's a lot of distrust and discomfort when it comes to the current sitting parties that are running things in the nation right now. I'm thinking that a lot of people are feeling the same. And I've heard that notion at the doors too, that a lot of people are feeling very uncomfortable with choosing a side, whether that be Democrat or Republican. And then, we got people who consider themselves diehard Republicans or diehard Democrats. And, you don't even really get a chance to ask them why that is. They don't want to hear anything. But, we're getting to a point where it's no longer time for us to vote for across just a party line, but we need to vote for our individuals, because we have a lot of people who are on either side of the court, and they are more or less on the same point. Both sides of the same point, and a lot of corporate greed, corporate interest, impact the politics all over the nation, and especially here in Connecticut. And as far as the citizens election program goes, there's a lot of hurdles for us. Initially we were going to go for the 10% grant, which means that we would have raised 3,000 signatures, and 17. And the amount doesn't change, so we would have to get $17,800 in order to qualify for the grant, and then we would have gotten maybe $30,000 or $40,000 to run the campaign. And that's the thing. We thought that was the original amount that we're supposed to get for the full grant, but in reality, it ended up being that we had to get around like 5,000 signatures. And with that being said, we are going to end up having to get maybe around 6,000 signatures just to be on the safe side. And the grant deadline is moving, so it's September 11th for the smaller amount. It was August 11th that we wanted the 100,000, but we weren't able to get the $17,000 in donations, and we're only at about 1,600 signatures. So it's quite the uphill battle. I know the very last deadline is around October 11th. I'd like to be at least at 4,000 signatures by the end of August, as well as closer to that, maybe 17,000, maybe get closer to about 15,000 or so, just so that we can kind of move at a faster rate. Because once we get a little bit closer, people will probably be more inclined to help us get there a lot faster. So there's a lot of hurdles. I, for one, believe that we will reach our goal of getting that money, and with those funds, we plan on doing a lot of events and things like that in Hartford and Wethersfield, as well as just getting a lot of my name out there, because a lot of people see me at the doors, and they say I never heard of you, and I really like what you stand for, and I'm hoping that once we get this grant money, we can really start doing a lot more community outreach. But it's very crucial that if you are, watching and that you are able to pitch in, that you pitch in as much as you can. Donations are limited between $5 and $290. And they can't be any higher or any lower. And this is so that we can keep big business out of politics in Connecticut. We want to make sure that our campaign is powered by the people and not corporate greed or corporate interest. And we don't want anyone feeling like they can influence our policy, by donating to our campaign unless they're a member of our community. You donate to the campaign, you're a part of the community. You have a right to advocate for whatever it is that you're fighting for, that you want to see in the community. And a lot of times these corporations just advocate for self-interest to make more money off of exploitation of the community. So we don't want that. So if you are an advocate, you are a Green Party member, make sure that you reach out and submit a donation. Visit mikeforct.org. That's MikeForCT.org and hit donation. If you want to learn more about me too, you can visit my website and check out the issues section. And I also recommend that you visit our Instagram too. That's at MikeForCT_.
Yeah, people should go to the website that's up on the page. Mike for CT for Connecticut. The donate button, when you land, you'll see the donate button. The donate URL is a whole lot of letters. It doesn't make no sense. So just use that URL and you'll see the donate button right away. And I hope everybody can put in at least $5.
Right.
I'm sure anybody can scrape up $5. Just so he gets a lot of donors, and if you can afford it, you can go up to 290.
And Howie, can I talk a little bit about what I'm about? Because I don't want to just ask if people can donate. I can tell them some of my main tenets of my campaign. You mind?
No, that's where we're going. I just want to make sure that people think about donating, because when you get to 17,000 and change, whatever it is, then you can focus on getting the signatures and get that public money.
Right.
The signature burden that is imposed on the Green Party. Here's what burns me up. It's about all the things I was talking about at the top. This country calls itself a democracy, but it's not. It's a two-party duopoly. Theoretically, you can have a third party, but they got so many barriers, it's not realistic. And as I've said many times, the worst one is single-member district, winner take all, because that puts the spoiler dilemma out there. And I saw somebody said, you got to find another name for the Republicans than extremists. They are extreme. They're not conservative anymore. They're extreme, racist, authoritarian, anti-democratic party. And I don't know what else to call them. But because of that, it's harder for people to vote for the Greens, even though they like us better, because they want to, defend against the Republicans. Moderates and liberals will vote Democrat all the way to stop the Republicans. That's the problem we face. And that in other countries, most countries are proportional representation. And ballot access is not an issue. You want to run for Congress in this country, it's thousands of signatures or tens of thousands of signatures in most states. You want to run for the House of Commons in the United Kingdom, it's 10 signatures, and so on. So, this democracy fight, and the other thing I'll say is the Democrats are not doing it. Where's the damn voting rights? Where's the damn election protection bills? They let the, people like Sinema and Manchin in their own party keep the filibuster, so they couldn't. And this has been going on since the Dixiecrats were in the Democratic Party, blocking civil rights legislation. And it's the same old Democrats because they didn't get it done this time. It just burns me up. So, okay, I'm done ranting. Give Michael money, and then tell us about your issues.
Some core tenets for me in the state of Connecticut. One big thing that I'm fighting for as an educator myself, as a former early childhood educator, is universal early childhood education. That's something that Georgia has had since 1995. And I think I want to say maybe as early as 2019 or maybe even 2021. I'm not 100% sure, but New York just passed universal pre-K as well. I personally believe that there's something that Connecticut should strive for, because we have one of the strongest education systems in the country, but that doesn't mean that we don't have room for improvement, especially in areas like the inner city. Areas like where I'm from, where early childhood education is either subsidized if we have the availability, because those programs are sometimes unavailable as well, either subsidized when it's available or just extremely expensive and unavailable. So, we can't have two ends of the spectrum like that, and expect that our communities are going to get any better, because education is a real good, big deterrent when it comes, especially early childhood education, when it comes to crime, and it influences the wealth gap as well. So we really need to start thinking about the impacts of what early childhood education can do for not only the wealth gap and crime, but just overall the education of the community, and those foundations, because our early childhood education system is what gives us our social skills. It's what gives us our ability to understand our colors, our numbers, our mathematics, our the basics, and that's why I call it foundation, foundation building. Because if we continue to build on shoddy foundation, or foundation that's not solid, then we can't expect to get better. And my hope is that when I get in office, that people start to really understand the dynamics that are at play here. There's a lot of lack of focus when it comes to foundation building across the board in this country. I'll give you another example of something that I'm fighting to, if not really improve, but transition away from, and that is Section 8 housing. Section 8 housing it has a long, very long wait list, and it has no real ways for individuals who are on it to essentially graduate out of it. And I'm not going to say that it has not lifted individuals out of homelessness or houselessness, but it has not created the transition that people need, that upward momentum that people need in order to become, to build generational wealth and get their own housing. So I'm advocating for the creation of more transitional housing, not just for the homeless and the houseless, but also individuals who are literally on the line, right? Like we have individuals who are living check to check, and if one bad thing happens, they're unable to make rent for a month or two. They are going to be homeless, or they will have to not sacrifice. They have to sacrifice time with their children in order to go to an extra job or two. This is not a way for anyone to live in any neighborhood anywhere in America. It's not something it's not sustainable. So I'm advocating for more transitional housing, more investment in transitional housing. These housing projects that do go up, these apartment buildings that do go up, because the city has been incredibly gentrified over the last few years. They need to make sure that 50% of these housing being created is affordable, and not just a buzzword affordable. Because affordable in Connecticut right now for all intents and purposes, right? It's about $1,400 for a one-bedroom apartment, or $1,500, and that's not affordable for like a good chunk of the people in the city of Hartford. We need wage-based rent control. We don't have the ability to even instill rent control in Connecticut because of the laws that we have here. So we need to create a system within itself that can combat the rampant housing insecurity in Connecticut. We see it all over the country. There's something that we can do about it in the state of Connecticut is creating more transitional housing, giving people an opportunity to get some financial literacy training, not having to work 3 jobs in order to pay for a place to live. Because as you know, individuals who are watching, Howie, housing is a human right. It has been deemed a human right by the United Nations High Commissioner's Office, that housing is a human right. And now we've already signed on to it as a country. Where we can act in the state of Connecticut is creating more access to housing and making that housing transitional. So that's another big thing that I'm fighting for. And that's for people who are formerly incarcerated, for people who are suffering from housing insecurity, and mostly for people who are suffering from homelessness and substance abuse. We need to make sure that they have housing first, and then we can worry about all the other things, um, and how they can come after. But another big thing for me, and I'll let you take over for this. I'll just give you guys like the top three things that I'm fighting for is something to do with our garbage. We need to handle our waste more efficiently, and we need not invest into incineration anymore because incineration is terrible for our environment. But we also can't pile up our garbage and expect it to not hurt our environment. The amount of methane that comes out of our garbage, the just amount of waste building up, it's just no good for the air in general because it's polluting our air. It's just causing a lot of issues. So I'm advocating for newer ways to process our garbage and deal with our garbage. And one of those processes is utilization of plasma art technology, which is a technology that essentially superheats our garbage to temperatures close to the sun. And it doesn't do this through combustion, which combustion, as you know, is harmful to our environment. It creates smog and it creates ash. We don't want to use those types of technologies anymore because they're harmful. So let's use plasma arc technology, which basically what it does is the process uses synthesis gas, which is hydrogen and I want to say carbon dioxide. And what it does is it passes the synthesis gas through a let's say there are two electrodes, and in between it, the arc is created and of electricity, and we push the synthesis gas through that. And what it does is it ends up in a controlled environment. It superheats our garbage to the temperature of the sun, and it breaks it down at an atomic level instead of burning it. So it basically disrupts the atoms in our garbage to a point where they can no longer keep their form. And what that does is it creates a plasma. And that can be used, because what happens is once it's cooled, it can be used as an aggregate for the roads. And if you are no stranger to Connecticut, our roads can be terrible. We're a New England state. The weather gets terrible, gets snowy, and that seeps into the ground. And the trucks come by and it cracks up our roads, and our roads are awful, for a large chunk of the year. And what we can do is we can use that aggregate as an inert aggregate, meaning that it's safe for the environment. When we break down our garbage into this plasma, it renders hazardous chemicals completely inert, and anything that's in it becomes inert. And what happens is we can use that aggregate for our roads. It's called it's just an aggregate. Vitrified glassy substance, if you will. And the facility will power itself because this process also creates that synthesis gas of hydrogen and carbon dioxide. So it will power itself, so it won't come at any additional cost to the community. And to deal with our garbage. And this is all part of a huge plan that I'm putting together called my Operation Green Obelisk. And what it does is it deals with our garbage, and deals with our roads, because our transportation budget is abysmal in the state of Connecticut because we don't have tolls and we don't want tolls. So it'll cut the costs in a lot of places if we get this going. And another major part of this equation for me as well is extended producer responsibility. Now, extended producer responsibility ensures that any people who sell things, and normally, there are people who advocate for extended producer responsibility for everything, but I want to just focus in on packaging and plastics. So what it does is, right as of now, and this is probably everywhere in the country except California, our tax dollars go towards recycling our waste, our plastics. So our tax dollars go towards processing the plastics and repackaging them and getting them back into the markets that need them. And I am personally, against it being something that we have to pay for several times. Like every time you buy a bottle of Coke, you're already paying the fee. You're paying all these things in order for this to be processed, and then given back to the people where we have to buy it from again. And in my opinion, it's not something that it's never been sustainable. It's not something recycling, and some plastics can't even be used again. So it's just not something that we should be using anymore. The way that recycling is done. So for me, I think that instead of that, we should be making the corporations that are the ones who are going to get this material back in the first place. Um, we make them essentially have to deal with the cost of processing and retrieval of their own product so that they can, again, put it back into the economy. And it should not it should not be the consumer's responsibility to deal with these materials. So I believe that if we do it this way to create a more circular economy, while plasma arc technology isn't circular, EPR is more circular. It ensures that we rethink the way that our products are being made and used. So I want to make sure that our products are being recycled the way that they should be. Um, and another thing, again, and this is all part of my Operation Green Obelisk, is dealing with our food waste. I want to revamp the way that we deal with our garbage, as you can see. But food waste needs to be composted on a large scale, so that it can assist with local agricultural industries, as well as people's gardens and things of that nature on a local level. But if we compost our food waste, instead of just throwing it away and putting it in landfills, we will be able to reuse that material for the agricultural industries and for local farms and things all over the state. So I think it's something that we need to start investigating, do some R&D across the board for all of these processes and start implementation, because it's a lot cheaper than investing in incinerators. To revamp the incinerator in Hartford would cost $500 million for a plasma arc technology facility. While it might not deal with 1,000 tons of garbage a day, maybe close to 200 or 300 tons a day. For the cost of one of these facilities, we could have 3 plasma arc, plasma gasifiers or plasma arc technology ran facilities. So we really need to start thinking about how we're dealing with our waste, done with incineration, and we need to work on our roads, and we need to deal with food waste more efficiently. So Operation Green Obelisk is probably one of the most important pieces of my legislation, because everyone complains about the roads and the air quality and the garbage. And food is very hard to come by. We live in food deserts. So, this is for me, it's an intersectional piece of omnibus package that can really tackle several issues at once. And, whether that's costly or not, let's see what happens after the research and development of my project. So that's one of the biggest pieces of legislation that are part of my campaign. I'm hoping to get a lot of support, bipartisan, within the Senate once I'm elected. But it's very, very important that I do get elected, and I won't be able to get elected unless I get a massive swell of support from, Howie's base, as well as from the community. And I need to be able to reach the community, and can't do that without funds, unfortunately, within this capitalist nation,
Well, let's start taking questions from people writing in. I did notice one about 3:15, which I'm curious about. It says Never Michael's WI for Wisconsin, and it mentions this guy Michael owns the pipeline and got the contract from Canadian Oil Corporation. I think that's Enbridge for Line 5. I've been up there in northern Michigan opposing that with the indigenous nations at their paddle up flotilla they have, I believe, around Labor Day. And there's Line 3, which our former vice president's candidate, Winona LaDuke, it's right through her nation's territory. Those are big issues. And then Jill Ferguson then writes, Tim Michael's residence is in Greenwich, Connecticut. So it is what? This guy's carpetbagging, running in Wisconsin?
Yeah, Greenwich. It's the rich people.
He's He's a corporation, basically. I don't know if he owns all of Enbridge. That's a big company in Canada. They got a contract with Enbridge, maybe. Anyway, I just found that interesting. And it reminds me, we got to still keep fighting these pipelines. This is something really important because, you know, what I've been calling Build Back Badly, the Manchin so-called climate bill, which locks in current levels of oil and gas production for a decade in exchange for some subsidies for corporations and consumers. Basically, we're paying corporations to do what we want them to do rather than doing it ourselves through public enterprises and coordinating all the changes that need to happen. I mean, I won't go into all that now, but the side deal is to make permitting of these pipelines, including CO2 pipelines from carbon capture and sequestration, to put it back into oil wells to get more oil out of the ground. You know, that's not, you're going to sequester that carbon, but you're going to burn some more. It's a scam. And so I'm just saying these pipeline fights are really important. Line 5, Line 3, Enbridge's projects up there in northern Minnesota and Michigan and Wisconsin. And then Mountain Valley Pipeline, that's in Manchin's backyard, fracked oil and gas from West Virginia and Ohio to West Virginia to North Carolina, mostly to export liquid nitrified gas or liquid natural gas, liquefied natural gas. I always have a problem with that, but LNG. These are really important fights. And just because Build Back Badly passed doesn't mean we can't win this fighting project by project. I mean, Cancer Alley, where all the refineries are in Louisiana, those people are opposed to Build Back Badly because they're a sacrifice zone, and they're saying we don't want to be a sacrifice zone anymore. So all the people of color environmental groups, Indigenous Environmental Network, the Taproot Justice Group, which is representing those people in Louisiana and the Gulf South, Indigenous Environmental Network. I mean, they all came out against this, and the Democrats are calling it a victory. They're calling a damn defeat a victory. That's why we need candidates like Michael. So that just struck me because I've been up there for the Line 5 fight. Those indigenous nations, like a dozen of them, you know, fighting their heart out.
Right.
You get the governor to say no, but it hasn't gone through, and it's still a project that may be alive. So keep fighting on those things, folks. Amiel Sachs asks, Michael, are you able to get any coverage from your area's media? How about the lefties on spaces like Twitter who are able to boost Matthew Ho's name? And she says she's an earlier donor, in regards.
You know, we do get a lot of media attention and a lot of support from local newspapers and things like that. But, you know, I'm not too familiar with a lot of the leftist spaces on the internet. So if you want, please, Amy, reach out to me and let's see if we can maybe figure some things out and strategize on how to get a little bit more outreach. My Twitter is not that big. My Instagram is pretty supportive, though, but I'd like to see it grow and, you know, become a lot bigger. You know, I'd like to get funded as soon as possible. You know, it's just been really hard doing this independently. And, you know, we don't have a lot of resources, as much resources as the Democrats and other large parties with a lot of concentration of power. So, you know, it's been a grind. You know, I had to raise $8,500 essentially by myself, and that's just using all of the channels that I have. But if you have, you know, some tidbits and ways for me to kind of expand and get more attention for my campaign, you know, please reach out to me. You know, you can reach me if you go on our website, or you can reach me by emailing info@mikeforct.org. You know, and I'll take that info and some strategic assistance from you.
Yeah, I see in the chat, Justice V put a link to a Reuters article from a couple days ago about the state of Michigan, which the governor is pushing. There it is. Their case is going to be heard. So, you know, at least in the courts, they're going to hear the state of Michigan's case against stopping the operation. And I just read the first paragraph, but they got a pipeline going in the Strait of Mackinac, which is, you know, where the what do they call it? Mission's got, they got the thumb, and then they got the peninsula, and the pipeline goes under that strait, which is very, you know, strong currents, and it doesn't go under; it's on the bottom of the Mackinac Strait. So, you know, a lot could go wrong, and now they want to widen it and build it bigger, and apparently the lawsuits to stop it. So, you know, cross your fingers for that. And I don't know if they're doing the Paddle Up Flotilla this Labor Day, but they usually do, and I expect they're probably doing it. If you're up in that part of the country, it'd be good to show up and support. Amy L. Sachs, I'll try to reach you through the campaign page after this program, Michael. Thanks.
And you can reach out to me on Facebook too. You can look for Michael Oretade, and you'll see my Facebook like page. You can shoot me a message on there. I'll respond as soon as I get the notification. Thank you, Amy.
Frankie Lee, Michael, Connecticut has an abundance of wealth. Do you have plans to reach out to the wealthy to help fund your programs to benefit the whole community, especially with housing?
So I'd like for us to advocate and push for taxing of the extremely wealthy in the state of Connecticut. There's a lot of fear around taxing the wealthy in Connecticut because people feel like the wealthy are going to leave. I don't believe that in the slightest. And it's not like we're going to tax them out of their house and home. We're going to tax them because they have excess wealth that they're able to pay extra. They're able to because not only do they already get, already taxed at a lower percentage than those who are at the bottom, but they also get tax breaks. But Connecticut has a huge tax problem. We're like the third in the nation for the highest taxes overall, and we have some of the highest property taxes in the nation as well. I believe we are the highest property tax base in the state of Connecticut. So there has to be a sort of a balancing act when it comes to levying more taxes on the wealthy and alleviating the tax burden on the not so wealthy or middle class and lower class groups in the state of Connecticut. There needs to be a sort of a balance that needs to be kept and held. But unfortunately, the amount of tax breaks and the percentage of taxation is not equal, and that goes for the entire nation. But here, especially in Connecticut, so we need to find out a way in order to fully fund our programs that we want to create. I've also been thinking about it on a grassroots level too. So if in the event that we cannot get this done through the state legislature, then we have to start thinking more creatively. And it really sucks because you would think that we don't need to do things ourselves, but sometimes you got to get out there and get boots to the ground and find ways to innovate. It's the reason why our kids have free breakfast and free lunch now, because the Black Panthers went out and they did what they had to do in the community, and they got donations and they did things on the ground on their own. We are at those levels right now where we need to be not desperate, but we need to be moving as if if we don't move this way, if we don't move in a way together as a people, then we're going to suffer at the bottom, and it's something that we have to kind of take upon ourselves, worst case scenario, and really put our heads together and come up with some solutions. And for me, that solution is my neighborhood housing initiative that I've been working on for the last few years. Just need to get that off the ground. I'm going to put everything I have into those. I'm going to get everything I have into fighting on the state legislature level as well as on the ground. So we'll figure it out. But we do need to tax the extreme wealthy in the state of Connecticut at a more equal rate. They already get enough tax breaks. It's time for us to figure out ways to increase their taxes so that we can, really fund all of these projects. That includes universal early childhood education, as well as more housing availability for the housing insecure and homeless.
Yeah, I find it helpful when I'm talking about progressive taxation. And I say what that means is we're going to cut taxes for the working class and raise taxes on the super rich. And in Connecticut, you got a strong argument because I know Connecticut is up there with New York among the most unequal states in the country.
Yes.
Yet the taxes between local, state, and federal are basically flat, except for the 1/10 or 1,000th of 1%. The very elite pay less taxes than the rest of us when you put all the taxes together. The other argument about people, the canard that, oh, the rich are going to move if we raise the income tax. Well, they wouldn't be making all the income if they weren't here. There's a reason they're here.
Right.
And they can pay a little more in taxes. And then we got a living laboratory between New Jersey, where the top bracket, I think, is 11%, and Pennsylvania, where it's 4%. And New Jersey jacked it up, I think, around shortly after the Great Recession, because they were in a fiscal crisis. And everybody said that, all these people, the conservatives saying, oh, they're going to run away. They're going to run across the river to Pennsylvania. The rich in New Jersey will move across the river to Pennsylvania so they could pay less income taxes. It didn't happen. Those taxes have been there now for, at least a dozen years. So, and there's other studies, you can find it in the academic literature. People don't decide where to locate based on the income tax rate.
Right.
And also companies really don't look at taxes. That's way down the list. When they're locating, they want labor force. Is it educated enough? Is it available? What's the length of transportation? What partners do we need, in our supply chains? They put all that stuff together. And then when they decide where they're going, when we have documented cases of this, then they'll go ask for tax breaks. We have a documented case in Syracuse. Company was coming to Syracuse. They already made up their mind. But they went to Youngstown, Ohio, and Scranton, Pennsylvania, said, we're thinking about you and Syracuse, but can you give us a tax break? And Youngstown and Scranton did. So then they come back to Syracuse and say, hey, we were coming to Syracuse, but God, we're getting these tax breaks from Scranton and Youngstown. So they got a tax break from Syracuse. They just basically hustled Syracuse. They were coming here anyway. So, all that stuff about taxes being a block to the rich people staying to pay taxes or companies coming is just, a bunch of nonsense. And there's good empirical evidence that you can use to show that's the case.
Right. Do we have any more questions?
Here we go. Violated Content Boutique, Affordable Housing Online, reports that 70% of affordable housing is within 1 mile of Superfund toxic waste sites. And there's a connection between toxic waste sites and federally supported housing. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
That doesn't surprise me either. Definitely something that we got to make sure that we look into. I'm sure that one of my volunteers is listening to this. I'm going to make sure that she looks into that so that we can probably find some more data on that and bring attention to that issue. Because again, we are activists, we're not politicians by definition. We are people that are for the people. So if this is something that is affecting our people, then it's something that we definitely want to bring attention to. Again, that process that I was basically telling you guys about, that plasma arc technology, it can deal with hazardous waste. So I think it's definitely something that we need to start looking into, because if I can render a hazardous waste inert, then I don't know why we're not doing that to create a more safer environment for everyone. So if they want to put all of our affordable housing in these areas, and let's start dealing with this toxic waste, so that they can to suck it. Like we can fix this. If they don't want to fix it, we'll make sure that we figure out a way to make our governments fix it. And way we can also do that, guys, is to unionize our tenants. So we need to start pushing for unionization of our tenants, so that they can have a say on, what what's happening in our housing market. You know, people who are renting, if they unionize, a bunch of people in a building can all, or several buildings or multiple buildings can all say, we're not paying rent until you lower the prices to something more reasonable. And no one's going to say, oh, we only want to pay $200 for rent, because they understand that pricing is the way that it works, right? So there's going to be a negotiation process that happens. But at the end of the day, a lot of tenants are at the mercy of their landlords, even with housing authorities and housing oversight and all these little things that the state puts in place that are supposed to protect you, that are constantly bombarded by complaints and so much cases, that we need to start taking things into our own hands. Like the people that came before us, our ancestors were not dependent on the government to completely do everything. We need to be a little bit more autonomous and make our government do what it's supposed to do. And that's where the activism piece comes in. Activate yourself so that you, and some people, might say they don't have time. You can create enough time for you to knock on your neighbor's door and say, look, we're on we're going to create a tenant union. Give me your information. Let's advocate. Let's all band together and not pay rent this month. And let's see what happens. Let one of us go. And that's the thing. A one person can represent a union. So one person, you guys can all go to work, and that one person can say, hey, I represent everybody that is a part of this tenant union in Hartford, or South End of Hartford, or West End of Hartford, whatever area you live in, anywhere in the country. And you can say, everybody is saying they're not going to pay rent if you don't lower our prices by this amount of money. We need a compelling argument for us to back down on this. And if you don't produce that compelling argument within the next 30 days, then we're going to bring it to the attention of the state and this and that. There's channels of ways for our unions to get the collective bargaining ability and utilize it so that we can collectively negotiate. And we need to start moving in those directions. If there's a toxic waste issue that's in 70% of all of our affordable housing environments, then it's something that we need to put the effort in communicating with the community and advocating and telling everyone that this is what's happening, and all these kids are getting asthma and all these people are dying from cancer because of this, and we need to do something about it together. And I will help you. I will do it for you. Be that person. Say, I will do it for you. Just sign your name on this. Because remember, you got to get 30% of wherever you are in order to get the union started. Get the 30%, or just get enough people together. And by the way, you got to visit cttenantunion.org. Just look up CT Tenant Union, and you'll be able to join the tenant union, or at least get the guidance that you need to create one. Because again, we are in a generation that is not privy to the power of collective bargaining. So we need to tap into that. I know that we're such a work-based society now that we can't even have the time for ourselves. But again, one person can represent your union for you if you sign on to that union. So make sure that you are pro-union and start unionizing even at your job. Remember that without you, that apartment is an empty building. Without you, that job is nothing. You can't you can't have a Walmart. You can't have a Starbucks without employees. They can try to replace you with robots, but that is only going to piss people off. We are a personable society. We are a communicative society. We are a society that operates off of companionship and collaboration. It takes more than one man to make a pen. Someone's got to mine the materials, someone's got to refine it, someone's got to bend it, somebody's got to package it to get it to everybody. So we got to start moving in that direction, that we are understanding of the dynamics of a more collaborative society, and that can be done through unionization of our workplace and our tenants and our housing. So let's start pushing for unionization. It's just another core piece of activism that we need to be making known to everyone. We need to bring back the power of a union in our communities.
Well, I think that was probably the last question because we're coming up on an hour. And first thing, just to wrap this up, Michael, thanks for coming on. Thanks for running. And thank you to those who have contributed to Michael's campaign. I see some of you came late. He needs to raise a little over $17,000 in small donations of $5 to $290 to qualify for public campaign financing. And that's why I'm in Hartford with him, because he also needs over 5,000 signatures. And I've been out here helping him get those. So, you know, there's a website, MikeForConnecticut.org, and the donate button's real big when you land on the page. So please, everybody, contribute something. That last question reminded me of, you know, last summer I wrote a 10,000 word article on environmental racism that I was solicited to me by an old friend from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She's writing an article with her daughter about education for the Journal of Modern Slavery. And this academic stuff is so damn slow. I submitted that a year ago. They still haven't edited it, right? You know, we're just waiting. I don't know what they're doing at these universities. But what I found in that article, I titled it "The Persistence of Environmental Racism," because I went through, and you know, I've lived through this, watched it, but I went back and reviewed since the first environmental justice cases came out of the civil rights movement. We've heard of Robert Butler down there in Dallas, and his wife took on some problems in their city. It was Houston. But one of the first environmental justice, anti-environmental racism fights was in a small Mississippi town. And it was over infrastructure inequality, access to sewage and water and roads. And the people that brought that, they won in court, federal court, but they were basically, their house was burned down. One of them was killed. You know, people died for environmental justice, and that was in the 70s. And, you know, there have been lots of cases. There's been, you know, people of color environmental justice movements since they came out with a manifesto in the early 90s. We read about cases. We do get occasional victories. But the overall picture is that, and the United Church of Christ, Benjamin Davis produced studies showing that race is the biggest predictor of where toxic waste is going to go. Poor people of color become targeted. We've got documented cases in the litigation, and sometimes these racists just blurt it out to the press. They put it in these poor communities of color because they're politically weak. So the conclusion that Robert Bullard came up with way back in the early 70s was that this disparate impact of pollution on people of color is because of the overall racism in society, which means the lack of political power in communities of color. And when I reviewed it, I said, you know what Robert Bullard said 40 years ago, or whatever it was, is still true today. And Bullard's on the environmental justice panel that Biden set up. But, from what I can see, it's all token. These pipelines, Line 3, Enbridge Line 3 in northern Minnesota. Biden could have stopped that. He could have stopped the Dakota Access Pipeline. He could have stopped Line 5. He could have stopped the Mountain Valley Pipeline through Appalachia. And he hasn't. Instead, he's permitted more oil and gas projects than Trump did in the same period, by a substantial margin. As the, Taproot Justice Group down there in the Gulf Coast said, that's aimed at us. It's environmental racism aimed at Cancer Alley and these other places down there. So it's still a problem. And then in this Build Back Badly bill from Manchin, they got environmental justice grants, $60 billion worth. But the Indigenous Environmental Network came out with a statement on that saying, hey, this is for-profit companies and the big NGOs, the big nonprofits, who got all the lawyers, got all the staff to do these complicated applications, probably know the people in the administration giving them out. Because it's who you know, not what you know, it really counts in these things. So what they're saying is this money may be there, but it's going to go to the people that don't live in the communities but claim to represent them. You know, professionals are going to get paid good. And in the end, you know, some good will come out of it. But by the time it trickles down to the community, you end up with tokenism and cancerality, for example, is still going on. So that fact about federally subsidized housing, that means public housing or Section 8 housing, affordable projects that are subsidized for private developers. Yeah, they're going to locate it in the most toxic places because the people already living there can't resist it and they can't get their places cleaned up. So this is a huge problem. And I get really tired when people say, well, the Republicans, you know, they wear racism on their sleeve. But the Democrats practice it too. And that's why we're Greens, I guess. So I've gone over time. I hope everybody's, I got the fire in my belly, man. I'm almost 70. As I told someone out there petitioning today, I'm angrier today than when they drafted me for the Vietnam War, which was, you know, I was not happy with that. And, you know, already, you know, disappointed that the Democrats dragging their feet, the Republicans too, on civil rights. We had Earth Day in that period, and it was clear, you know, corporate America, you know, they were pushing oil and gas. When we had the energy crisis in the 70s, Carter was the president. His solution was synfuels, synthetic fuels, taking coal and, you know, processing it into combustible liquid fuel, gasoline. Man, oh man. And we had solar and wind back then. It's a lot cheaper today, but we knew the answers back then, and here we are. So I still got the fire in my belly. I hope you do too. I hope you have a good week. Do some organizing out there, and we'll see you next week.